So I'm an avid lover of legal series. And one of my favorites is the series Suits. One of my favorite characters in Suits as well is the lady called Jessica Pearson. I mean, she walks into a room and she just owns it. And that's what I want to talk about today. Executive presence, the leadership quality that every female leader must have. The first thing is this: confidence. You have to become self-aware and master self-confidence. You have to know what makes you unique and love it. Many of us are not very confident people. We're so focused on the things about us that don't work, the things about us that we don't think are great. But you know what? Confidence is actually one of those things where you can literally fake it until you make it. So we see everyone, male and female alike, they're struggling with self-confidence. And yet, many times we women, we tell ourselves that we're not good enough. Men tend to blame their failures on external things outside of themselves, but we internalize things. So build your confidence, become self-aware, think through what your strengths are, even as simple as the fact that you have a great smile. Now, you also want to try to build your confidence through your small wins. One of the things that I do is to think through time and time again the places that I've succeeded, the milestones that I've achieved, and remind myself that insofar as I was able to do those things, there is literally nothing else I cannot do if I set my heart to it. Now, one of the things you have to master is how to silence your inner critic, because every one of us has that voice inside us that's telling us we are not enough and we never can be. Remember how it is that you know you're looking great, but that one negative comment someone made about your hair is all you can think about all day. Silence your inner critic. Rather try to reframe anything that you hear internally. Every time you hear a voice saying you can't do this, remind yourself, I might not be able to do this, but I'm about to learn how and I'm going to master it. The second thing is this: pay attention to your physical presence. Pay attention to how you walk into the room, how you stand and how you sit. Now, literally, the way you project outwardly in terms of your physical presence is a reflection of your inner self to some degree, yeah? But if you get comfortable in your own skin, if like me, you pay attention to the fact that every single person has a place where they're insecure and unsure, then you can walk in and own your space. So when you walk into a room, for instance, walk in, make sure that you're standing tall, raise your head, lift your shoulders high. Make sure you recognize that you are someone who is bringing value into a room. And the way you walk into a room also determines the way that people address you. When you sit down, don't shrink into a corner. Actually, you need to sit up and take your space at the table. Every time you are invited into a room, onto a table, remind yourself it is because you deserve to be there. So don't shrink away. Put your feet firmly on the floor. Stare people in the eyes when you're speaking to them. Look directly at them. It conveys confidence. Don't be flitting around trying to avoid people's eyes, because it makes you look like you're uncertain, inexperienced, and perhaps have no right to be in the room. Pay attention also to what you're wearing. You want to cultivate a professional image. And no, I don't mean that you have to be wearing a suit. If you know me, you know that I don't do suits. But when you want to go into any room, make sure that you yourself, when you look at yourself, you can salute yourself. Pay attention, because that first way that people see you is going to affect how it is that they perceive you, and then, of course, how it is that they treat you. The other thing I want to say is this: build mastery. You have to work your area of competence and expertise and get to the level of mastery. And then you have to showcase your mastery. So yes, you may be great at your job, you may be great at your field, but if nobody knows it, then I'm sorry, but you still have work to do. When we're talking about executive presence, a big part of it is communication. And this communication is verbal and non-verbal. When it comes to the area of your skills, therefore, you have to be able to communicate your expertise with confidence at every given opportunity. So for instance, when you go for presentations, try to avoid, focusing on the papers you have in your hands, the points you determine to make, and just let yourself speak from the place of experience. Now, also don't go into meetings unprepared. That's very important also. Don't go into meetings without having paid attention to what will be discussed at the table, making sure that you're more current with the developments in your industry, with your sector, so that when you speak, you're literally speaking things that are of relevance in that space and in that time. It's also important from the point of view of mastery that you have your own unique perspectives and insights about any topic. So you mustn't necessarily conform. Executive presence is not about conformance. It's about owning your space physically, emotionally, mentally, and indeed psychologically. So when you walk in, let me tell you, you need to walk in knowing that you're an asset and you're coming to bless the people that you have an audience with. executive presence needs you to establish your own unique voice. And ladies, this is something you need to pay attention to. You have to pay attention to the tone of your voice, the timbre of your voice. There are some meetings you want to go into, and I promise you that in those places, you don't want to be sounding very light and girly. You want a deep and mature tone so that when you speak, you command attention, especially if you're speaking with a microphone. There's actually an art to that, And the sound of your voice in many ways conveys competence and it conveys credibility. Also pay attention to the language that you use. So when you want to speak at the table, don't start with "I'm sorry," or don't start with things like, "Well, it may not make sense, but I wanted to say." Sometimes we say things that disempower ourselves. And already by the time you start a sentence with "I'm not sure if this makes sense, but let me just say it," honestly, it's like you're asking people, why are they even listening to you? So don't apologize for what you have to say. Now, when you want to reinforce something, perhaps a point someone has already made, you can say something as simple as, "Excellent point. Let me now build on this from another unique perspective." And that really makes everyone turn and focus to see what it is that you're bringing in addition to what has already been shared. Now, your unique voice also needs you to practice, so please don't be casual about this. If you're required to make a presentation, to speak in front of people in a meeting or any other different forum, practice, practice, practice. And don't practice in your head. Literally, go to the front of a mirror and present to yourself. In fact, many times we're advised to make the presentations and then listen, record them, and listen later to see how we sounded. You'll be amazed at the difference that it makes when you can command presence simply using your voice. Now, I'm still speaking about communication, but let me take it from another perspective. You see, when you're a person of executive presence, you actually literally have control of your audience. And that means that you are careful to think before you speak. You have to consider, why am I speaking? What is the message? What are the key objectives and points that I want to pass across? And take your time and be deliberate so that you deliver exactly that. Now, in the process of communication, remember that listening is also an art and it's a skill that you want to build. People want to know you as a solid listener. There is a way you sit and focus and everybody gravitates towards you because they feel they are being heard. In that place of listening as well, you pick every little point that matters. And when you have to articulate and bring things together to inform the people you are gathered with or to take a decision, you find it's a much more robust decision. Lastly, still on this art of communication, is to pay attention to silence. Silence is actually a very powerful tool. Many times, the people that have executive presence, they just kind of sit and own that space in absolute silence. What happens when you're confidently silent is that the people around you feel an urge to say more. And the more they say, the more you learn. And the more you're able to see the direction of their thoughts, their motives, and their intentions. And you actually have a more formidable response to give to those that you're with or to take decisions for yourself. So please don't ever feel compelled just because you're at a table that you must talk at every point. Sometimes there are meetings I sit in and I say absolutely not a word because I know that the second meeting, I'm going to take charge of the room. It's all about executive presence. Think before you speak, listen, and then again, enjoy the silence. It's really powerful. So in talking about the things that help you to build executive presence, let me put out a caveat and talk about what executive presence is not. Executive presence is not a call to be a fake version of yourself. It's not a call to become something that you are not. Actually, as I see it, executive presence and cultivating it is you cultivating your best, most authentic, most powerful self so that you can grow and others around you can grow as well. Originality and authenticity are actually at the core of executive presence, and your ability to communicate this to people is what is the game changer for you. So please continue to nurture yourself, nurture your voice, nurture your inner strengths, and deliberately, intentionally build this capacity to be able to project it outward. So just like my favorite person, Jessica Pearson, I want to see you walk into a room and totally own it. I want to see you at a table where you are the center of attention, and when you do speak, nothing but pure wisdom comes out of you. I want to leave you with this quote, and it says this, that executive presence is inherently a developmental process of daily emotional weightlifting. It is a process of becoming your real self when it is easier and more tempting to run with the herd and to jump with the bandwagon of mediocrity. If you know me, you know I don't do mediocrity. So here's looking forward to seeing you at the table. I hope this was useful to you. Take care.